Across the wind-swept plains of our planet, beneath the suffocating canopy of forgotten jungles, there are whispers. They are not carried on the wind, nor are they written on parchment that turns to dust. They are messages from a past so deep it has nearly been lost to time. Messages spoken in stone. We are taught that the story of humanity is one of linear progression, a tale carefully documented in scrolls and ancient texts. It's a neat, orderly timeline, leading from primitive beginnings to our complex modern world. But what if that written history is dangerously incomplete? What if it's merely the final chapter of a much, much older epic? Around the globe, a different kind of record exists, a library of monoliths. We see them in the colossal heads of the Olmec, the serene faces of Buddhas carved into mountainsides, and the stoic gazes of the Moai on Easter Island. Mainstream science often labels these impossible achievements as tombs, idols, or ceremonial markers. They are explained away as the product of brute force and a primitive faith. Yet, the closer we look, the more the questions compound. How were they carved with such impossible precision? How were they transported, sometimes across hundreds of miles of impassable terrain? Who were the artists, the engineers, the civilizations that possessed the will and the means to create them? These stone sentinels stand as a testament to a past we barely know, a past of profound mystery and forgotten genius. They challenge everything we thought we knew about our ancestors and about ourselves. So, today, we journey to the far corners of the earth to listen to their stories, to stand before the silent giants, the impossible relics, the mysterious statues that scientists still can't explain. Our journey begins on a tiny triangular speck of volcanic rock adrift in the immense emptiness of the Pacific Ocean. This is Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, the most remote inhabited place on Earth. It's a land of rolling green hills, sheer volcanic cliffs, and a profound, palpable loneliness. And here, standing guard over this isolation, are the silent watchers, the Moai. Nearly 1,000 of them litter the landscape. These monolithic giants, some towering over 30 feet tall and weighing more than 80 tons, are a haunting presence. Carved from the island's volcanic tuff, they stand with deep-set eyes, long ears, and enigmatic expressions. But their most peculiar feature is their gaze. They do not look out to the vast sea, as one might expect from island sentinels. Instead, almost all of them stare inland, their backs to the ocean, as if watching over the ghosts of their creators. The mainstream academic explanation paints a tragic yet simple picture. The Rapa Nui people, having settled the island around 1200 AD, began an obsessive ritual of carving and erecting these statues to honor their deified ancestors. To transport them from the Rano Raraku quarry, it is said they felled the island's great palm forests, using the logs as rollers and sledges. This statue-building frenzy, according to the theory, became their undoing. In a classic tale of ecocide, they depleted their most vital resource. Without trees, they could no longer build seaworthy canoes for fishing. Their soil eroded, and their society spiraled into warfare, starvation, and eventual collapse. The story of Rapa Nui is often presented as a stark warning, a microcosm of what could happen to our own planet if we manage our resources unwisely. It's a neat, self-contained story of human folly. But is it the correct one? The closer one examines the evidence, the more this tidy narrative begins to fray. The sheer logistics of the log-rolling theory are staggering. The island's terrain is not flat. It is rugged, hilly, and uneven. To move an 80-ton statue
Miles across such a landscape would require an immense number of logs, a perfectly level track, and hundreds of people working in flawless unison. Some experiments have been attempted, but they have struggled to replicate the feat, even with smaller statues and ideal conditions. Then there is the issue of the largest Moai ever carved. Nicknamed El Gigante, it lies unfinished in the quarry, a gargantuan figure nearly 70 feet long. Its estimated weight is 270 tons. No rational archaeologist believes this titan could have ever been moved with ropes and logs. So why was it carved?
The Rapa Nui legends themselves contradict the official story. Their oral traditions do not speak of sledges or backbreaking labor. They say the statues walked. The elders claim that ancient priests used a divine power known as mana to command the Moai to move from the quarry to their platforms, or ahu. To archaeologists, this is mere folklore. But what if the legends are not metaphors, but memories of a forgotten technology? Some researchers have pointed to the intriguing possibility of acoustic levitation or sonic resonance. The idea, while speculative, is that specific sound frequencies, when properly harnessed, could drastically reduce the weight of a massive object, making it possible to move with minimal effort. Could the concept of mana have been a description of a lost science, an understanding of physics that has since vanished from the world? This idea of a forgotten technology, a mastery over the laws of nature, is not unique to Rapa Nui. The mystery deepens when we consider the collapse. Was the obsession with statue building truly the cause of their downfall? Or were the Moai a desperate attempt to avert a catastrophe we don't understand? Perhaps the Watchers were not just memorials, but functional objects, their purpose now lost to us. We are left with an undeniable enigma, a supposedly primitive, isolated society that quarried, carved, and transported nearly 1,000 colossal statues only to vanish into obscurity, leaving their creations to stare silently over a desolate landscape. The mystery of how a civilization could raise such giants only to fall echoes across the ocean. But what if, on the other side of this vast expanse, in the heart of a dense and humid jungle, another lost culture left behind clues that are even more inexplicable in the stoic faces of kings who seemingly came from another land?
From the isolated shores of the Pacific, our quest for answers takes us deep into the heart of another enigma, into the sweltering primeval jungles of the Mexican Gulf Coast. This is the Olmec heartland. Here, under a suffocating canopy of green, a civilization rose and vanished thousands of years before the Aztecs were even a memory. They left behind no written language we can decipher, but they did leave behind portraits of a truly impossible scale. In 1862, a farm worker exploring a dense thicket stumbled upon what he thought was a giant, overturned iron kettle buried in the earth. As he dug, a pair of solemn eyes and powerful lips emerged from the soil. It was not a kettle. It was a face. A 10-ton face carved from a single block of stone. Since then, 17 of these colossal heads have been discovered. Each is unique, wearing a distinctive helmet-like headdress, and each stares forward with an expression of serene, absolute authority. Archaeology tells us these are the faces of the Olmec, the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Flourishing between 1500 and 400 BC, they laid the foundation for all subsequent civilizations in the region, including the Maya and the Aztecs. The accepted theory is that these heads are realistic portraits of individual Olmec rulers, carved from massive basalt boulders. The source of this stone has been traced to the Tuxtla Mountains, a volcanic range over 100 kilometers away from the main Olmec centers like San Lorenzo. The official explanation for their transport is one of sheer human determination. Thousands of laborers dragging the multi-ton blocks on wooden sledges over land and floating them on massive balsa wood rafts down rivers. It's a testament, we are told, to the organizational power of these early kings. But a closer look at the logistics reveals a nearly insurmountable challenge. The Olmec possessed no beasts of burden, no wheeled vehicles, and no hard metal tools. The journey from the mountains was not a simple stroll, it was a treacherous passage through swamps, dense jungle, and across winding rivers. Could a civilization, at the very dawn of its existence, truly muster the engineering prowess to move 50-ton blocks across such an environment? The feat seems to strain the limits of their known technological capabilities to the breaking point. However, an even more profound mystery is etched into the faces themselves. Even more perplexing than how they were moved is who they depict. The features carved in the stone, the broad, flat noses, the thick, full lips, are not characteristic of the indigenous Amerindian people of the region. To many observers, past and present, they appear to be distinctly African.
This observation is the source of a fierce and ongoing debate. Mainstream archaeology flatly rejects the connection, arguing that the features are simply stylized portrayals of local rulers, perhaps depicting features of jaguars or other symbolic animals. Yet the portraits feel too individual, too human to be mere symbols. So why would the founding culture of Mesoamerica, the supposed ancestors of the Maya, carve monumental portraits of rulers who looked like they came from an entirely different continent? This has led to the highly controversial theory of pre-Columbian contact. Could a sophisticated seafaring group from Africa have crossed the Atlantic thousands of years before Columbus, influencing or perhaps even establishing the Olmec civilization? While the idea is often dismissed as pseudo-archaeology, the stone faces remain stubbornly silent, refusing to conform to our neat models of ancient history. Like other enigmatic first civilizations around the globe, the Olmec seem to appear in the archaeological record with their complex culture already largely formed. They leave behind these incredible heads, intricate jade carvings, and the seeds of a calendar that would later be perfected by the Maya before mysteriously vanishing around 400 BC. Who were they? Were they a lost lineage of Native Americans whose physical traits have since disappeared? Or do these stone faces stand as irrefutable evidence of a forgotten chapter of global migration? A chapter that would force us to redraw the maps of the ancient world. The enigma of a people who don't seem to fit their own geography is a deeply unsettling one. But as we now travel across the Pacific, we find that another ancient culture, half a world away in modern-day China, left behind artifacts that are not just geographically out of place, they seem to be out of this world entirely. From the enigmatic faces of the Americas, our journey now takes us east to the fertile plains of Songshan Province in China. For centuries, the official history of Chinese civilization was written in the north, along the banks of the Yellow River. It was there, we are told, that the Shang and Zhou dynasties forged the foundations of a great culture. The south, by comparison, was considered a remote, primitive backwater. Then, in 1986, an event occurred that would not just rewrite a chapter of Chinese history, it would tear the book apart. Workers at a brickyard, digging for clay, struck something hard. It wasn't rock. It was a pit filled with priceless treasures that had been deliberately broken and buried for 3,000 years. As archaeologists began to excavate, they unearthed a trove of artifacts that defied all logic and expectation. Over 1,000 objects of jade, gold, and burned elephant tusks. And then they found the bronzes. These were not the ritual vessels of the northern Shang. These were colossal, otherworldly figures.
They had angular faces with vast, protruding eyes, some shaped like cylinders, others with pupils like staring diamonds. They had enormous, stylized ears, listening for secrets from another world. They looked like nothing ever found in China or anywhere else on Earth. The accepted historical model simply had no place for Songqingdui. The sheer scale and technical sophistication of the bronze casting were equal to, and in some cases surpassed, that of the Shang dynasty. The artifacts included a stunning 8-foot-tall bronze statue of a standing man, the largest of its kind ever found. They uncovered a magnificent bronze spirit tree, nearly 13 feet high, with intricate branches, birds, and dragons. This was not the work of a primitive tribe. This was the heart of a powerful, wealthy, and technologically advanced Bronze Age civilization that had flourished, completely unknown to history, at the very same time as the Shang. The implications were staggering. The story of ancient China was not a single linear progression from one source. Here was evidence of a parallel, equally brilliant culture that had been utterly lost to time. But unlike the Shang, who left behind oracle bones covered in early Chinese writing, the people of Songqingdui left behind nothing. Not a single character, only these silent, haunting figures. This silence forces the artifacts themselves to speak, but their language is one of profound mystery. What, or who, are we looking at? The academic consensus suggests these are representations of gods, myths, or powerful shaman kings. The bizarre features, it is argued, are not literal but symbolic, intended to convey supernatural power, eyes that could see into other realms, ears that could hear the voices of spirits. The masks, perhaps, were mounted on wooden bodies and dressed in ceremonial robes.
But to many, these explanations feel inadequate. The features are too specific, too consistent across multiple sculptures to be mere fantasy. They do not resemble any known iconography from ancient China. This has led to more speculative questions. Could the artists of Songqingdui have been depicting something they had actually seen? Were they creating portraits of their gods? Or were they creating portraits of visitors, beings not of this world? The alien-like appearance is so striking that it's impossible to ignore the possibility that we are looking at something far stranger than just a forgotten religion. Ultimately, Songqingdui represents a completely independent branch of the human story, a civilizational island that rose to incredible heights of artistic and technical achievement before being completely erased. They were a people who created a universe of imagery unlike any other, who held beliefs and saw a world we cannot even begin to comprehend. We are left with a chilling set of questions. Who were the people of Songqingdui? What gods did they worship with these magnificent and terrifying bronzes? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, why did they, around 1200 BC, methodically smash their sacred treasures, burn them, and bury them in deep pits before completely vanishing from the face of the earth? The discovery of a lost civilization that rivals the known greats is a humbling revelation. It suggests our history is filled with immense gaps. But what if we were to find something that doesn't just challenge the map of ancient history, but challenges the very timeline itself? What if we found proof of high culture and monumental construction not from a lost kingdom, but from a lost era of humanity, long before the first cities were ever meant to exist?
Our search for answers has led us from lost kingdoms to forgotten peoples, but all have existed within the familiar framework of civilization. Now we journey to a place that rips that framework to shreds. We arrive at an unassuming, rounded hilltop in southeastern Turkey. For millennia, locals called it Göbekli Tepe, or Potbelly Hill. It was a place of quiet pilgrimage, believed to be the resting place of a long-forgotten saint. But in 1994, the late German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt looked at the hill and saw something else. He saw the subtle work of human hands on a massive scale. And when he began to dig, he uncovered a structure that, according to our history books, simply should not exist. He found the world's first temple. Not a village, not a tomb, but a sprawling complex of massive circular enclosures defined by enormous T-shaped pillars of carved limestone, each weighing up to 15 tons and standing 18 feet tall. To understand the earth-shattering importance of this discovery, we must first remember the story we have always been told about our own origins. For hundreds of thousands of years, humanity lived in small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers. Our existence was defined by the constant search for food. Then, around 10,000 years ago, everything changed with the Neolithic Revolution. We learned to cultivate crops and domesticate animals. This agricultural breakthrough allowed us to create a food surplus, which in turn allowed us to abandon the nomadic life and build permanent settlements. From these first villages, cities grew. With cities came social hierarchy, specialized labor, and eventually the luxury of complex organized religion and the ability to construct monumental architecture. The formula was simple and linear. Agriculture led to settlements, which led to civilization and temples. It was the bedrock of modern archaeology. And then, Göbekli Tepe was dated. The results that came back from the labs were not just surprising, they were an academic bombshell. The deepest, oldest layers of the site were dated to an astonishing 9600 BC. Let that sink in. This is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It is 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is by a staggering margin the oldest megalithic structure ever found on Earth. And most importantly, it was built by people who had not yet invented pottery, who had not smelted metal, who had no writing, and who, crucially, had not yet developed agriculture. The people who quarried, transported, and intricately carved these 15-ton pillars were hunter-gatherers. This single fact inverts the entire timeline of human history. The long-held formula was wrong. Here was proof that so-called primitive nomads were capable of incredible feats of organization, engineering, and symbolic expression. At Göbekli Tepe, the temple came first. Klaus Schmidt himself proposed a revolutionary new theory. What if it was the desire to build this sacred gathering place that kick-started civilization itself? The immense effort of construction would have required different bands of hunters to cooperate, to organize, and, most importantly, to stay in one place for long periods. The need to feed this massive workforce may have been the very catalyst that spurred the invention of farming. In this new model, it was our search for meaning, our quest for the divine, that gave birth to the modern world. The temple led to agriculture, which led to cities.
But what was the purpose of this great temple? The pillars are not crude blocks. They are covered in masterful, high-relief carvings of animals, snakes, boars, foxes, and menacing scorpions. Vultures feature prominently, often associated with death and excarnation. Some researchers, noting that Göbekli Tepe was built immediately after the end of the last ice age, a time of violent climate change and mass extinctions known as the Younger Dryas, theorized the site is an astronomical observatory. Could the animal symbols represent constellations, a map of the sky created by the survivors of a global cataclysm to preserve the knowledge of a world that was lost? Perhaps the most profound mystery is what happened to it. After more than 1,000 years of use, Göbekli Tepe was not conquered or destroyed. Around 8000 BC,
Its creators deliberately and painstakingly buried their entire creation. They backfilled their magnificent temple with millions of cubic feet of earth, rubble, and bone, preserving it perfectly for the next 10 millennia. Why would a culture bury its most sacred cathedral? Was it to protect a great secret? Or to create a time capsule, a message in a bottle for a distant future that had forgotten its own deep past? The act of burying a treasure to preserve it for eternity speaks to a profound vision. But while the builders of Göbekli Tepe sought to preserve a memory, another, much later civilization sought to build an army to conquer not just the future, but death itself.
The desire to preserve a legacy, to leave a message for the future, is a powerful human impulse. But what if that impulse is taken to its absolute extreme? What if a ruler sought not just to be remembered, but to build an empire that could defy death itself? Our journey now leads us to the heart of China, to a discovery that revealed the scale of such an ambition. In March of 1974, a group of farmers in Lintong County were digging a well to combat a drought. As their shovels sank into the dry earth, they struck something hard. It was not a rock. It was the fired clay head of a man, with realistic eyes, a carefully sculpted mustache, and an impassive stare that had not seen the light of day for over 2 millennia. The farmers had unknowingly stumbled upon one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. They had found the advance guard of a silent, subterranean army. As archaeologists began to excavate, the true, mind-boggling scale of the find was revealed. Pit after pit contained the spectral ranks of a life-sized military force. Thousands of infantrymen, archers, charioteers, and cavalry horses, all crafted from terracotta, stood in battle formation, ready to march for their emperor. History tells us this ghost army belongs to one man, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. A brilliant, visionary, and utterly ruthless ruler from the 3rd century BC, he was a man of grand ambitions. He standardized China's language and currency, began construction of the Great Wall, and infamously burned countless books to erase the history of his rivals. But his greatest obsession was his own mortality. He dispatched expeditions in search of the mythical elixir of life and spent decades planning his own journey into the afterlife. The Terracotta Army was to be his eternal honor guard, a force of over 8,000 soldiers, built by a reported 700,000 conscripted artisans and laborers. It was a perfect replica of his imperial legions, meant to protect his soul and allow him to continue his conquests in the next world. This explanation, however, barely scratches the surface of the mystery, for these are not mass-produced identical statues. A close examination reveals a level of artistry and technology that is profoundly challenging. Every single soldier, from the highest-ranking general to the humblest archer, has a unique face. They are individual portraits with distinct hairstyles, expressions, and features. How did the artisans of the Qin dynasty achieve this level of mass-produced individuality?
When they were first unearthed, the warriors were not the monochrome figures we see today. They were painted in brilliant, vibrant lacquers of purple, red, and green, which tragically flaked away and faded within minutes of being exposed to the air. We are seeing only the pale ghosts of their original splendor. Most astonishingly, their bronze weapons, swords, spears, and crossbow triggers were found to be in pristine condition, still razor-sharp after 2,200 years, buried in the damp earth. Analysis revealed that they were coated in a thin, protective layer of chromium dioxide. This advanced chrome plating is a technology that scientists in the West only developed in the 1920s. How did Qin Shi Huang's craftsmen master a technique that was 2 millennia ahead of its time? And yet, all of this, the thousands of unique soldiers, the lost colors, the futuristic technology, is merely the opening act. This entire world-famous army is just the perimeter defense for the true secret, the tomb of the emperor himself, a 250-foot-tall, pyramid-shaped mound that lies sealed and untouched just a mile away. What lies inside that mound has been the subject of legend for centuries. Our only written account comes from the Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian, who described a subterranean palace of unimaginable scale. He wrote that the emperor's sarcophagus floats in a tomb chamber that is a perfect microcosm of his empire. The ceiling is a map of the heavens, studded with pearls to represent the stars. The floor is a map of his earthly domain, with China's great rivers and oceans replicated in channels of flowing liquid mercury, made to circulate by mechanical means. And to protect it all, Sima Qian wrote of deadly traps, crossbows and arrows rigged to fire automatically at any intruder. For 2,000 years, this was dismissed as a fantastical legend. But modern science has revealed that the legend may be terrifyingly real. Scientific probes of the soil in the tomb mound have detected levels of mercury that are hundreds of times higher than the surrounding area. The rivers of mercury are almost certainly real, which gives terrifying credence to the stories of the traps that guard them. The unopened tomb is a perfect time capsule, a sealed world from an emperor who tried to reboot history. What lost knowledge, what priceless treasures, what secrets of his advanced technology are locked inside with him? The Chinese government, out of respect for the emperor and fear of destroying the tomb's fragile contents upon opening it, has forbidden its excavation. The mystery is right there, beneath our feet, but it remains tantalizingly out of reach. This ghostly army, guarding its eternal secret, presents us with the ultimate archaeological paradox, a mystery we might have the power to solve, but choose not to. It reminds us that for every answer we unearth, countless more remain buried, silent, and waiting. The statues we have seen on our journey are not just objects of stone and clay, they are question marks, each one challenging the story we tell ourselves about who we are and where we came from.
Our journey has taken us across the globe and deep into the annals of forgotten time, seeking answers from storytellers who speak not in words, but in stone. On the lonely shores of Rapa Nui, we stood before the silent watchers, questioning how a supposedly primitive society could command giants to walk. In the humid jungles of Mesoamerica, we saw the faces of an unknown people, their features a profound riddle of ancestry and origin. From a buried pit in China, the otherworldly masks of Sansingdui stared back, the haunting relics of a brilliant civilization that history had completely forgotten. In the Anatolian highlands, we found Göbekli Tepe, a temple older than civilization itself, a sacred place that rewrites the very first chapter of our settled story. And finally, in the heart of China, a ghost army of clay stands eternal guard over a tomb of impossible secrets and lost technologies, a mystery we dare not disturb. Individually, each of these is a fascinating puzzle, but taken together, they form a mosaic, a picture of the ancient world that is profoundly different from the one found in our textbooks. These are not just beautiful artifacts to be admired in a museum. They are data points of defiance. They are pieces of hard evidence that refuse to fit the simple, linear narrative of human progress, a steady march from primitive hunter to sophisticated city dweller. These statues speak of impossible engineering, of lost artistic traditions, of advanced scientific knowledge, and of timelines that simply should not exist. It forces us to confront the most fundamental question of all. What if we are a species with amnesia? What if the great civilizations we call ancient, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Chinese, were not the dawn of human innovation, but were instead the heirs of a legacy? What if they were rebuilding upon the faint memories of a far older, far more advanced global chapter of the human story, one that was nearly erased by a great cataclysm deep in our past? In this light, these statues are no longer just art. They become echoes. They are the fragmented memories of a lost world, the last remaining signposts from a history we were never meant to forget. The ground beneath our feet is not just soil and rock. It is a library of unread books. The story of humanity is not finished and bound. It is a living investigation, and the most astonishing discoveries are still waiting. The silent storytellers of stone have not yet revealed all their secrets. They wait patiently in deserts, jungles, and beneath the hills of our modern world. They are a permanent challenge to our certainty, a timeless reminder that the human story is far older, far stranger, and far more magnificent than we have ever dared to imagine. The greatest chapters may be the ones we have yet to unearth.
In the quiet, dust-filled archives of our collective memory, the grand narrative of human history is carefully preserved. It's a story we are all told, a simple, linear ascent from the first sharpened stone to the bronze spear to the age of steam, and finally to the digital blow of our modern world. It is a comfortable tale of slow, steady progress, a predictable climb from primitive beginnings to technological supremacy. But deep within the earth, and in the forgotten corners of museum vaults, lie objects that refuse to fit this neat and orderly tale. Technological phantoms from an impossible past. They are the glitches in the timeline, artifacts of such baffling sophistication and anachronistic design that they whisper of a profoundly different story. These are not mere curiosities. They are profound, uncomfortable questions cast in stone and metal. They suggest that our past is not a straight line, but perhaps a cycle of rising and falling, of lost golden ages and forgotten sciences. They force us to wonder if ancient civilizations reached technological peaks that were then catastrophically lost, only to be slowly rediscovered millennia later. These objects are the tangible evidence, the echoes of a forgotten world that threaten to shatter our established timeline. To begin our investigation into this lost chapter of history, we must first travel to a place that precedes the pyramids, Stonehenge, and even the invention of pottery. A place that by its very existence rewrites everything we thought we knew about the dawn of human civilization.
High on a barren ridge in southeastern Anatolia, a place the locals call Göbekli Tepe, or Potbelly Hill, the story of our past was broken wide open. For millennia,
This unremarkable mound was thought to be nothing more than a medieval cemetery, its secrets sleeping beneath layers of earth and time. Until 1994, when archaeologist Klaus Schmidt looked closer and saw not headstones, but the tops of immense, deliberately shaped pillars. What he and his team began to unearth would not just challenge a few academic theories, it would detonate the very foundations of prehistoric human history. The accepted timeline, the one taught for generations, was clear and simple. 12,000 years ago, at the twilight of the last ice age, humanity existed in small, scattered, nomadic bands. They were hunter-gatherers, their lives dictated by the seasons and the migration of animals. They had not yet invented pottery, metallurgy, or even writing. And most critically, they had not yet developed agriculture. Without the surplus of food that farming provides, they could not have established large permanent settlements, let alone the complex social structures required for monumental construction projects. This was considered an undisputed fact of our development. But Göbekli Tepe stands in defiant contradiction to that fact. What lies beneath that hill is not a village, not a settlement, but a sprawling complex of massive, megalithic temples. The oldest layers date back to an astonishing 10,000 BC. That is 7,000 years before the Great Pyramid of Giza, 6,000 years before Stonehenge. This is the zero point of monumental architecture, and it appeared as if from nowhere. The site consists of at least 20 enormous circular enclosures. At the center of these circles stand pairs of monolithic T-shaped pillars weighing up to 15 tons and towering 18 feet high.
These are not crude rocks. They are elegant, highly stylized representations of humanoids, and they are covered in exquisitely carved reliefs of animals, venomous snakes, powerful lions, scorpions, and vultures. This is a symbolic library from a time before words, a gallery of a forgotten mythology. The sheer logistics of its creation are staggering. How did a society of hunter-gatherers with only the most primitive of stone tools quarry these massive blocks from a nearby hillside? How did they transport them and then lift them into precise upright positions? This level of construction requires planners, engineers, and a large, coordinated labor force. It requires feeding and housing hundreds of workers for months, if not years. It necessitates a shared ideology, a powerful belief system so compelling that it could unite disparate tribes in a single, colossal undertaking. It requires civilization. And yet, it exists in a time when we believed no civilization was possible. This paradox has forced a profound reevaluation of our past. Schmidt himself proposed a revolutionary idea. The accepted sequence of events was backward. Humanity did not invent farming, then build temples. Instead, it was the collective will to build a sacred place like Göbekli Tepe that spurred humanity to innovate. The immense effort may have been the very catalyst that led to the domestication of wheat and the birth of agriculture, simply to feed the builders. The temple came first. Religion was not a byproduct of settlement, it was the engine. But who were these people? What astronomical knowledge did they possess, as some researchers suggest the pillars aligned with the stars? And perhaps the greatest mystery of all,
is why, after 2,000 years of use, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately and carefully buried. Around 8000 BC, their creators filled every enclosure with debris, entombing their sacred work under tons of earth, preserving it perfectly for a distant future they could never have imagined. Why hide a masterpiece? Were they protecting it, or was their work complete? Göbekli Tepe leaves us with the unsettling realization that a sophisticated, organized, and spiritually complex culture thrived in the Stone Age, only to vanish, leaving behind a single monumental enigma. Their genius was expressed in stone, but it forces us to ask what other forms of ancient knowledge have been lost. What if another, equally brilliant culture expressed its genius not in megaliths, but in something far more complex and impossibly intricate?
Genius can be expressed in many forms. In the monumental stones of a forgotten temple, we see the ambition of a collective. But sometimes, genius is quieter, more precise. It can hide within a single object, a testament not to communal effort, but to a level of individual intellect so far advanced it appears almost alien to its time. To find this ghost of a forgotten science, we must leave the sun-scourged hills of Turkey and journey into the deep, silent darkness of the Aegean Sea. In the year 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers took shelter from a storm near the small island of Antikythera. When the storm passed, they dived and stumbled upon the remains of an ancient Roman cargo ship wrecked nearly 2,000 years before. The site was a treasure trove of the classical world: marble statues, elegant glassware, and priceless pottery. And among the treasures, brought to the surface in 1901, was a corroded, unassuming lump of bronze, no larger than a modern laptop. For decades, it sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, largely ignored, dismissed as a part of a statue or perhaps a curiously complex piece of naval equipment. It was an artifact without a category. Because, according to the official history of technology, it simply could not exist. The mainstream understanding was that while the ancient Greeks were masters of geometry and philosophy, their engineering was largely limited to civil and military applications. The concept of fine, intricate clockwork, precision gearing for complex calculations, was a world away, an invention that belonged to the great cathedral clocks of Renaissance Europe, more than 1,000 years in the future.
But as the decades passed, researchers began to probe the corroded lump with ever more advanced technology. First with X-rays, and then with state-of-the-art computer tomography. And as the murky interior was slowly revealed, layer by layer, the academic world was stunned into disbelief. Hidden within the calcified bronze was not a simple mechanism, but a breathtakingly complex clockwork universe. At least 30 distinct hand-cut bronze gears were interlocked in a system of staggering sophistication. This was not a simple navigational aid. This was an astronomical computer. Inscriptions deciphered from its surfaces revealed its purpose. By turning a single hand crank, the user could predict the position of the sun and the moon against the zodiac. It modeled the phases of the moon.
It predicted solar and lunar eclipses with startling accuracy. It even accounted for the subtle irregularities in the moon's orbit using a brilliant pin and slot mechanism, a level of mechanical theory that would not be seen again until the 16th century. Beyond the heavens, it had a practical purpose, tracking the 4-year cycle of the Pan-Hellenic Games, including the Olympics. It was a mechanical cosmos in a box, a complete philosophical and scientific model of the universe as the Greeks understood it. Its existence shatters our timeline of technological progress. It is a sudden, inexplicable peak of mechanical genius with no known predecessors and no successors for 1,500 years. The question is not just how they built it, but who. Scholars speculate it may have originated on the island of Rhodes, a hub of Hellenistic astronomy where the great astronomer Hipparchus worked. But no writings from him or anyone else describe such a device. It is a complete orphan of history. Was the Antikythera mechanism a singular, miraculous invention, the work of one lone Da Vinci of the ancient world? Or is it something far more unsettling? Is it merely the last survivor? The only remaining example of a long and sophisticated tradition of mechanical engineering that has been almost entirely erased from the historical record. Perhaps the ancients built countless such devices, masterpieces of bronze and brass that have all since corroded into dust, leaving this one ghost to tell their tale. The mechanism proves that at least some ancient minds conceived of the cosmos not just through myth and poetry, but as a predictable, rational, clockwork system. They possessed a paradigm of mechanical science we thought was born in the Renaissance. This legacy of precision and calculation, lost to the sea for 2 millennia, opens up a profound question. If they applied this level of sophisticated measurement to the heavens, what happened when they applied it to the earth itself? What if this lost science of geometry and projection created not just celestial computers, but terrestrial maps? Maps of a world that, according to our history, they should not have been able to see.
In the hushed, climate-controlled archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace lies a fragment of a world that should not exist. Drawn on a delicate sheet of gazelle skin parchment, it is a symphony of coastlines, islands, and cryptic notations. This is the surviving portion of the first world map of Piri Reis, an admiral of the Ottoman fleet. The year of its creation is 1513. At first glance, it is a masterpiece of its time, a stunningly Renaissance cartography merging the known world with the newly discovered lands of the West. Its lines are rendered with a confidence and an accuracy that is, in itself, remarkable. But to look closer is to gaze into an abyss of history, a mystery that unravels our very understanding of the past. The mainstream historical view presents a clear and logical explanation. Piri Reis was a brilliant mariner and a meticulous scholar. On the map itself, he wrote that he had consulted over 20 source maps and charts, including 8 Ptolemaic maps, an Arabic map of India, 4 Portuguese maps, and even a lost map drawn by Christopher Columbus himself. Academics laud the map for its stunningly precise depiction of the western coasts of Europe and North Africa and the coast of Brazil. For the 16th century, this was the pinnacle of cartographic knowledge. It is celebrated as a masterful synthesis, the work of a genius who stood at the crossroads of ancient knowledge and the great age of discovery, weaving them together into a single, coherent vision of the world, a triumph of compilation, a testament to one man's dedication. But this comfortable explanation begins to fray when our eyes drift to the very bottom of the parchment. There, extending eastward from the tip of South America, is a landmass that is both familiar and utterly alien. The coastline depicted is unmistakably the northern coast of Antarctica. This is the first impossibility. The continent of Antarctica would not be officially discovered by modern explorers for another 300 years in 1820. How could Piri Reis have known of its existence? The mystery, however, goes deeper. The true enigma is not that Antarctica is on the map, but how it is on the map. The coastline shown is not the one we see today, a sheer cliff of ice. Instead, the Piri Reis map charts the bays, inlets, and river mouths of the actual landmass, the continent beneath the ice. It shows the coast of Queen Maud Land as it would.
Piri Reis provides a clue. He stated his map was based on far more ancient sources. This admission has led to a breathtaking theory, one championed by scholars like Professor Charles Hapgood, whose research famously captured the attention and respect of Albert Einstein. Hapgood proposed that Piri Reis never saw Antarctica. He was merely a copyist. He had in his possession a chart derived from sources of almost unimaginable antiquity, maps created by a forgotten maritime civilization with a mastery of the globe. This was no primitive culture. To map the world with this level of precision, particularly in terms of relative longitude, would have required advanced mathematics, sophisticated astronomical knowledge, and chronometers for accurate timekeeping, an invention not perfected until the 18th century. This lost civilization, the theory suggests, would have explored and charted the entire planet during a much earlier epoch, a time when Queen Maud Land was free of ice. This wasn't a map of the 16th century, but a cartographic ghost, an echo from a time before the ice came, passed down through millennia from one hand to another until it landed in the workshop of an unsuspecting Ottoman admiral. The Piri Reis map does not exist in a vacuum. It is part of a disturbing and fascinating pattern. Other maps from the era, like the Orentius Phineus map of 1531, also show a detailed, ice-free Antarctica, complete with accurate mountain ranges and rivers, where today there are only glaciers. These are not isolated mistakes or flights of fancy. They are consistent, detailed portraits of a world out of time. They suggest that the cartographers of the Renaissance may have been the unwitting inheritors of a profound legacy, the last remnants of a complete and ancient global survey conducted by a culture lost to the mists of a forgotten prehistory. These parchments are more than just maps. They are artifacts that challenge the fundamental timeline of human civilization. They whisper of a past where the oceans were navigated and the world was known long before the history we are taught in schools ever began. They force us to wonder what other knowledge, what other sciences and stories were lost in the cataclysms that erased these master mariners from our memory. The map is a message in a bottle, a fragment of a world we were never meant to see. It begs a final, haunting question. If they charted the earth with such impossible precision on parchment, what other legacies might they have left behind, cast not in ink, but in stone?
Deep beneath the golden sands of Egypt, within the subterranean crypts of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, the air is still and heavy with the passage of millennia. The cartouche-covered walls are a library of stone, depicting the gods and rituals of a civilization that measured its own history in dynasties. But here, in the oppressive darkness, one set of reliefs stands apart, profoundly strange and unnervingly modern. Carved into the limestone is a large, clear, pear-shaped object. Inside it, a long, wavy line. A serpent snakes its way from a flower-like socket at one end to the other. A cable, braided and distinct, connects this socket to a box upon which a god kneels. For a modern eye, the image is inescapable. It is a giant light bulb, complete with a filament, a socket, and a power source. According to mainstream Egyptology, what we are seeing is not technology, but theology. The explanation is one of rich, complex symbolism. The bulb-like shape, they say, represents the womb of the sky goddess Nut. The snake-like filament is the god Harsamtus, a form of Horus, symbolizing the rising sun being born from a lotus flower, the socket. The so-called cable is merely a celestial stream, and the box is a jed pillar, the symbolic backbone of the god Osiris, representing stability. For Orthodox academics, the case is closed. The Dendera light is a sophisticated mythological portrait of creation, a purely religious concept carved in stone. It is a beautiful myth, nothing more. But what if a myth was the only way the ancients knew to preserve the memory of a lost science? What if the depiction at Dendera was not just a story, but a diagram? For evidence of a practical application, we must travel 1,000 miles away, from the Nile Valley to the plains of Mesopotamia, to a dusty museum shelf in modern-day Iraq. The artifact is humble, almost comically simple. A small clay jar, just 5 inches high. Inside, a cylinder of sheet copper is sealed with asphalt. Suspended in its center, but not touching the sides, is a simple iron rod. Discovered in 1936, it was labeled a ritual object and largely forgotten. It is known today as the Baghdad Battery. Because when this simple clay pot is filled with an acidic electrolyte, something as common as vinegar or grape juice, it produces a steady electrical current of about 1 volt. It is, in its most basic form, a galvanic cell, a battery.
Dated to sometime around 200 BCE, it predates Alessandro Volta's invention of the battery by 2,000 years. Here, an ocean of sand away from Dendera's carving, we find not a depiction of power, but a potential source for it.
The existence of a functional ancient battery shatters our assumptions. The most conservative theory suggests these devices were used for a simple form of electroplating, gilding jewelry with a micro-thin layer of gold. But could they have been used for more? Imagine these batteries, these galvanic cells, linked together in series, their voltage multiplying with each addition. Could they generate enough power to produce a visible, usable light? We return to Egypt and to a persistent architectural mystery, the complete lack of soot on the ceilings of so many deep tombs and underground passages. The accepted theory involves complex and inefficient systems of polished copper mirrors used to reflect sunlight deep into the earth. But an alternative solution presents itself, one that is clean, efficient, and eerily corroborated by the carvings at Dendera. The theory suggests the Egyptians had a form of electrical lighting, that the relief is not a myth, but a schematic, a sacred blueprint left by the descendants of those who still remembered how to harness this clean, silent power to illuminate their most sacred spaces. The Baghdad Battery and the Dendera Light, two whispers from two separate cultures, hint at a shared, forgotten knowledge. They suggest a chapter of human history has been torn from our books, a chapter in which our ancestors were not primitive, but pioneers of a science we thought was our own. This was not just a different past, it was a different path of technological development, one that vanished almost without a trace. This ability to generate power, even on a small scale, opens a doorway to a forgotten world of possibilities. It forces us to look again at their greatest achievements, not as feats of brute force, but of lost science. If they could illuminate the darkness within their tombs, what forces did they command to shape the colossal stones that built their world? Imagine a hidden museum, a room filled not with the treasures of known kings or the pottery of recognized cultures, but with the impossible. A cabinet of curiosities for history itself. On its shelves sit objects that defy our timeline. Artifacts that whisper of a past so deep it has been crushed into geological oblivion. Our first exhibit comes from a story told in the newspapers of 1852. In Dorchester, Massachusetts, a powerful blast was used to clear rock from a quarry. After the dust settled and the smoke cleared, workers found, amidst the rubble, two halves of a metal pot. Blasted from within solid 600-million-year-old conglomerate rock was a bell-shaped vessel made of a zinc-silver alloy, exquisitely inlaid with floral patterns in pure silver. The Dorchester pot, a delicate work of art from a time before the first dinosaurs, before complex life had even truly conquered the land. Confronted with such an anomaly, the scientific method demands skepticism. These objects are known as oparts, or out-of-place artifacts, and the mainstream approach is to analyze each one in isolation, seeking the simplest explanation. The Dorchester pot, it is argued, was likely a contemporary Victorian piece, perhaps a candlestick holder that was simply lying nearby and became mixed in with the debris of the blast. The story, it is suggested, was embellished over time. Similarly, other famous O-parts are given conventional explanations. The Klerksdorp spheres, metallic-looking orbs found in 2.8 billion-year-old rock in South Africa, are dismissed as concretions, natural mineral formations that can sometimes form in perfect spheres. For every impossible artifact, a plausible, mundane explanation is sought. The goal is to resolve the anomaly and preserve the established timeline of history. But to dismiss each piece of evidence individually is to risk missing the forest for the trees. While any single object can be explained away as a mistake, a misidentification, or a hoax, the cabinet of curiosities continues to fill. The sheer volume and variety of these anomalies begin to challenge the simple explanations. Let us look again at the Klerksdorp spheres. While many are simple spheroids, others are anything but natural. Some are found to be perfectly balanced. More impossibly, some feature multiple perfectly parallel grooves running around their equator, as if machined on a lathe. Natural geological forces can create spheres, but can they machine them with such precision?
The list goes on. The Koso artifact, what appears to be a modern spark plug encased in a 500,000-year-old geode. The Ayud wedge, an aluminum object of clear artificial design, found buried beside mastodon bones from 20,000 years ago, long before humans were supposed to have developed aluminum metallurgy. Tiny metallic spirals, measured in fractions of a millimeter, found in 100,000-year-old soil layers in the Ural Mountains. Individually, they are curiosities. Collectively, they become a chorus, singing of a history we have never known. What if these objects are not out of place at all? What if, instead, our timeline is simply wrong? This is the foundation of a radical alternative theory, that these artifacts are the last surviving remnants of one, or perhaps many, advanced civilizations from the deep past. This theory suggests we are not the first industrial society on this planet. Others rose, thrived, and fell into ruin millions of years before our own species even evolved. They worked with metals, understood complex machinery, and perhaps even harnessed forces we are only just beginning to rediscover. What we find is not their grand monuments. Time grinds mountains to dust, let alone cities. We find their refuse, their lost tools, their discarded machine parts, their dropped vases, the small, incredibly durable objects that could survive the crushing pressure and unimaginable timescale of geological processes. This archaeological evidence does not point to a forgotten human kingdom. The ages involved, hundreds of millions, even billions of years, are so vast they preclude any connection to Homo sapiens. If this theory holds true, we are looking at the legacy of a pre-human intelligence on Earth. We are sifting through the wreckage of worlds or worlds that existed in an epoch we can barely comprehend. The pyramids and temples we study are but yesterday's news.
These humble, impossible objects, a metal sphere, a tiny coil, a simple pot, could be the only remaining proof that the story of intelligent life on this planet is far older and far stranger than we have ever allowed ourselves to imagine. They are the true ancient aliens, and their home was Earth. These small, indestructible whispers of lost worlds challenge our very place in the cosmos. They suggest that the story of life on this planet may be a palimpsest, a text written, erased, and written over again, with our own civilization being merely the latest entry. It forces us to ask the most fundamental question of all. If we are not the first advanced civilization to call this planet home, are we destined to be the last?
We have journeyed to the edge of the historical map, through archives of impossible cartography, into the crypts of forgotten power, and deep into the geological bedrock of time itself. The artifacts we have witnessed, the map, the battery, the machined spheres, are more than just anomalies. To view them as isolated curiosities is to miss their collective, thunderous message. They are fragments of a history that has been shattered, pieces of a puzzle we are only now beginning to reassemble. These relics suggest that the story of our world is not a simple, linear ascent from primitive to modern. Instead, it appears to be a history of cycles, of brilliant civilizations that rise, master their world in ways we still do not understand, and then vanish, leaving behind only faint, indestructible echoes of their greatness. The evidence points not to a past that was simpler than our present, but to one that was profoundly different, possessing a lost science and a forgotten understanding of the cosmos. Perhaps the greatest mystery then is not what these objects are, but what they represent, the sheer scale of our own ignorance. They prove that there are unwritten chapters, entire volumes of the human and perhaps non-human story buried right beneath our feet. We are a species with amnesia, living amongst the ruins of a past we have yet to discover. The search for who we are has only just begun. Beneath the shifting sands of forgotten deserts, and carved deep into the living rock of silent mountains, lie the final whispers of antiquity. These are the tombs of the ancients, ornate, gilded cages designed not only to house the dead, but to preserve the legacies of kings and the secrets of entire empires for all time. For centuries, we have carefully opened these vaults, believing we understood the worlds they contained. Within their hallowed darkness, we expect to find the familiar echoes of the past, the golden masks of pharaohs, the clay tablets of scribes, the ceremonial daggers of fallen warlords. Each object tells a comfortable story, fitting neatly into the grand, accepted narrative of human history. But scattered amongst these priceless treasures, in the deepest and most sacred of chambers, something else has been found. Objects that defy our neat explanations, artifacts that whisper of a knowledge, a staggering technology that, according to our own history books, should not have existed for thousands of years. These are not just anomalies. They are paradoxes sealed in stone,
glitches in the timeline that challenge the very foundation of human ingenuity we hold to be true. What if these impossible artifacts are not errors in our understanding, but deliberate messages left behind? What if they are evidence, chilling, compelling evidence, that the story of our past is far grander, far more complex, and infinitely more mysterious than we have ever been told? In this investigation, we unseal these ancient tombs to examine the relics that were never meant to be found. Our journey into this shadow history begins now on the dusty plains of Mesopotamia, where a humble clay pot holds a secret that threatens to send a powerful current directly through the heart of history itself.
Beneath the shifting sands of forgotten deserts, and carved deep into the living rock of silent mountains, lie the final whispers of antiquity. These are the tombs of the ancients, ornate, gilded cages designed not only to house the dead, but to preserve the legacies of kings and the secrets of entire empires for all time. For centuries, we have carefully opened these vaults, believing we understood the worlds they contained. Within their hallowed darkness, we expect to find the familiar echoes of the past, the golden masks of pharaohs, the clay tablets of scribes, the ceremonial daggers of fallen warlords. Each object tells a comfortable story, fitting neatly into the grand accepted narrative of human history. But, scattered amongst these priceless treasures, in the deepest and most sacred of chambers, something else has been found. Objects that defy our neat explanations. Artifacts that whisper of a knowledge, a staggering technology that, according to our own history books, should not have existed for thousands of years. These are not just anomalies. They are paradoxes sealed in stone, glitches in the timeline that challenge the very foundation of human ingenuity we hold to be true. What if these impossible artifacts are not errors in our understanding, but deliberate messages left behind? What if they are evidence, chilling, compelling evidence that the story of our past is far grander, far more complex, and infinitely more mysterious than we have ever been told? In this investigation, we unseal these ancient tombs to examine the relics that were never meant to be found. Our journey into this shadow history begins now on the dusty plains of Mesopotamia, where a humble clay pot holds a secret that threatens to send a powerful current directly through the heart of history itself.
At the turn of the 20th century, a team of Greek sponge divers, blown off course by a storm, took shelter near the small island of Antikythera. Diving the next day, they stumbled upon the wreckage of a Roman-era cargo ship, a watery tomb preserved for 2 millennia beneath the waves.
Amongst the scattered marble statues and ancient pottery, they recovered a corroded, unassuming lump of bronze, so encrusted with sea life it was mistaken for a rock. For decades, this calcified mass sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, little more than a curiosity. It was a miracle of survival, but the true miracle lay locked inside. As the layers of corrosion were painstakingly analyzed and later penetrated by X-rays and advanced CT scans, an impossible reality emerged from the decay. This was not a weapon, nor a statue. It was a machine of such breathtaking complexity that it has been rightfully called the world's first analog computer. The mainstream scientific consensus, in this case, is more shocking than any fringe theory. The Antikythera mechanism was an astronomical calculator of almost unbelievable sophistication. Housed in a wooden case the size of a shoebox, its face displayed a clockwork map of the known cosmos. By turning a single knob, an operator could track the intricate dance of the heavens. It followed the position of the sun and the moon through the zodiac, predicted solar and lunar eclipses with pinpoint accuracy down to the very hour, and even accounted for the subtle variations in the moon's orbit, a feat of mathematics known as the first lunar anomaly. It was a portable cosmos, a clockwork oracle that could chart the past and predict the future of the sky. But here is the profound, history-shattering problem. According to our established timeline of progress, this object simply should not exist. Nothing even approaching its level of mechanical genius appears again in the historical record for over 1,000 years. Its creation required a masterful understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and micromechanics that we associate not with the ancient world, but with the master clockmakers of 14th century Europe. Inside its fragmented shell, researchers have identified at least 30 distinct and cut bronze gears. These are not simple cogs. The mechanism employs an advanced system of epicyclic or planetary gears and a brilliant pin and slot device that mimics the moon's variable speed. This is not the work of a lone genius tinkering in a shed. It is the pinnacle of a long and established tradition of precision engineering, a tradition for which we have no other physical evidence. It is a technological island, separated from the next continent of knowledge by an ocean of dark ages.
This single, startling piece of evidence forces us to reevaluate everything. If the Mercury rivers are real, what about the rest? What technology could produce and circulate such a vast quantity of the toxic liquid metal? And what of the ever-burning lamps? Is mermaid grease simply a poetic term for a long-lasting fuel we have yet to identify? Or could it be a description passed down through legend of a technology akin to the electrical lights hinted at in Dendera? A contained, self-powering system of illumination designed to last for an eternity. The tomb transforms from a burial site into a potential repository of lost technologies, a sealed laboratory of ancient ingenuity. And yet, the tomb remains sealed, not only by the will of an ancient emperor, but our own modern fear. Archaeologists are rightly concerned that a premature excavation with current technology could irrevocably damage the priceless contents within, causing them to disintegrate upon contact with the air. So we wait.
The ultimate proof of a lost world may lie just a few hundred feet beneath the soil, but we dare not look. This presents us with the ultimate physical barrier, but it is not the only one. Sometimes the greatest walls are not made of earth and clay, but of academic dogma and a stubborn refusal to see what lies in plain sight.
Deep beneath the magnificent Temple of Hathor at Dendera, down a narrow, winding staircase, lies a series of crypts that were never meant for public view. In these cramped subterranean chambers, where the air is still and the silence is absolute, the ancient priests of Egypt conducted their most sacred rituals, far from the light of the sun. The walls here are covered in some of the most unusual and baffling reliefs in all of Egyptian art. For it is here, in the suffocating dark, that the ancients carved what appears to be a secret of light itself. The images are stunning and bizarre. From a stylized lotus flower, a symbol of creation, emerges a massive, transparent, pear-shaped bulb. Within this bulb, a long, wavy serpent is depicted, its head touching the far end. The stem of the lotus extends like a thick cable, connecting to a square pedestal known as a jed pillar, a symbol of power and stability. Figures are shown holding and interacting with these strange objects, their postures suggesting reverence and careful handling. The entire scene is unlike anything else in the vast lexicon of Egyptian iconography, an unnerving fusion of the mythological and the technological. According to mainstream Egyptology, the explanation is purely symbolic, a complex visual representation of a creation myth. In this interpretation, the bulb is the celestial womb of the sky goddess Nut, from which the sun is born each morning. The serpent is the god Harsomtus, a solar deity embodying the rising sun's energy. The lotus is the primordial flower of creation, and the jed pillar is the backbone of the god Osiris, providing the stability for the cosmos to exist. It is, they say, a beautiful and intricate allegory, a hymn to the dawn, carved in stone. But this mythological explanation, while elegant, fails to address a profound and persistent mystery that haunts every sealed tomb and subterranean passage in Egypt: the problem of soot. These deep chambers have no windows, no natural light source. To create such intricate, detailed carvings would have required a powerful and sustained source of illumination. Yet the ceilings of these crypts, like those in the Valley of the Kings, are almost entirely free of the black, greasy soot that would be the inevitable byproduct of torches or oil lamps. The theory of using a complex series of mirrors to reflect sunlight deep into these winding corridors has been tested and found to be functionally impossible. So, how did they see? It is in this context of unexplained darkness that the Dendera reliefs become truly provocative. The resemblance to modern electrical devices is simply staggering. Engineers and alternative researchers have pointed out that the object looks exactly like a large-scale Crookes tube or Geissler tube, early forms of electric discharge lamps.
In these tubes, when a high voltage is applied, the low-pressure gas inside glows, and the resulting plasma often takes on a serpentine, snake-like form.
identical to the serpent in the carvings. The lotus flower becomes the lamp's socket, the thick stem a power cable, and the jed pillar, with its stacked, ribbed appearance, a perfect representation of a high-voltage electrical insulator. The entire relief suddenly transforms from a myth into a schematic diagram, a blueprint for an ancient, colossal light bulb.
In 1944, a group of farmers digging a well in central China struck something hard. What they had found was not rock, but the head of a clay soldier. They had unknowingly stumbled upon one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. Buried beneath the fields was a silent, subterranean army of over 8,000 life-sized terracotta warriors, each with a unique face, standing in battle formation. For over 2,000 years they have stood guard, an army of ghosts protecting an emperor's eternal sleep. And yet, this breathtaking legion is merely the opening act, the outer defense for the true prize, the still-sealed tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. It lies just a mile away, beneath a colossal, man-made pyramid of earth, a silent mountain holding secrets that have tormented historians for centuries. Our only glimpse into this unopened world comes from the records of the Grand Historian, written a century after the emperor's death by the court historian Sima Qian. His descriptions are so fantastical, they read more like mythology than history. He wrote that the tomb is a microcosm of the emperor's vast domain. Great palaces and pavilions were built, filled with rare jewels and fine utensils. The ceiling of the central chamber is a map of the heavens, studded with pearls and gems to represent the sun, moon, and constellations. The floor is a topographic map of the entire empire, and upon it, the great rivers of China, the Yangtze and the Yellow River, were recreated using rivers of flowing liquid mercury, mechanically engineered to circulate and mimic the currents of the sea. To illuminate this subterranean kingdom forever, the emperor commanded the creation of ever-burning lamps fueled by what Sima Qian mysteriously calls mermaid grease. And to protect it all, craftsmen built automated crossbows rigged to fire upon any intruder who dared to breach the sanctum. For centuries, these accounts were dismissed as fanciful legends, the exaggerations of a historian trying to capture the grandeur of a near-mythical emperor. It was assumed that the tomb, if it held anything, would be a more conventional, albeit grand, royal burial. A river of mercury was simply impossible, a fantasy. But then, in the 1980s, science intervened. Researchers conducting soil surveys on the surface of the burial mound discovered something that made the ancient texts chillingly plausible. They found concentrations of mercury in the soil directly above the central tomb that were hundreds of times higher than the surrounding area. More astonishingly, the patterns of the highest mercury concentration formed a distinct shape,
a shape that perfectly matched the courses of the great rivers on ancient maps of China. The legend, it seems, is bleeding through the earth itself.
This single, startling piece of evidence forces us to reevaluate everything. If the Mercury rivers are real, what about the rest? What technology could produce and circulate such a vast quantity of the toxic liquid metal? And what of the ever-burning lamps? Is mermaid grease simply a poetic term for a long-lasting fuel we have yet to identify? Or could it be a description passed down through legend of a technology akin to the electrical lights hinted at in Dendera? A contained, self-powering system of illumination designed to last for an eternity. The tomb transforms from a burial site into a potential repository of lost technologies, a sealed laboratory of ancient ingenuity. And yet, the tomb remains sealed, not only by the will of an ancient emperor, but our own modern fear. Archaeologists are rightly concerned that a premature excavation with current technology could irrevocably damage the priceless contents within, causing them to disintegrate upon contact with the air. So we wait. The ultimate proof of a lost world may lie just a few hundred feet beneath the soil, but we dare not look. This presents us with the ultimate physical barrier, but it is not the only one. Sometimes the greatest walls are not made of earth and clay, but of academic dogma and a stubborn refusal to see what lies in plain sight. We have journeyed from the sands of Mesopotamia to the depths of the Aegean Sea. We have peered into the sacred darkness of an Egyptian crypt and stood before the unopened tomb of a Chinese emperor. We have seen a spark of impossible electricity, the celestial gears of a forgotten science, a serpent of captured light, and legends of a subterranean world sealed from our view. Each of these discoveries poses a profound question to our understanding of the past. But perhaps the strangest and most challenging artifact we must now examine is not made of clay or bronze. It is not an object you can hold in your hand. It is a pattern of resistance, of dismissal, of a deep and persistent unwillingness to confront the implications of these inconvenient truths. We have arrived at the final barrier in our investigation, a wall of academic silence. To be clear, the scientific method upon which modern archaeology and history are built is a powerful tool. Its inherent skepticism is its greatest strength. The process of peer review, the demand for repeatable evidence, and the principle that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof are the guardians that protect our understanding from being overrun by fantasy and baseless speculation. The accepted timeline of human history was not invented. It was painstakingly assembled over generations from millions of points of data. To challenge this structure is, and should be, an immense undertaking. The burden of proof must be exceptionally high. But what happens when that healthy skepticism hardens into rigid dogma? What happens when the guardians of our history are no longer protecting it from error, but shielding it from evidence that threatens to rewrite the entire story? This is the controversial world of forbidden archaeology. It is a field populated by discoveries that don't fit the dominant paradigm. And because they don't fit,
they are often subjected to a process of what has been called knowledge filtration. Anomalous findings are starved of research funding. Papers are rejected by peer-reviewed journals, and the researchers themselves are professionally ostracized, their careers jeopardized by their curiosity. We see this pattern again and again. An object is found that suggests advanced ancient technology. The official explanation insists it must be a ritual item, a misinterpretation, or a modern hoax, because the established paradigm says advanced technology did not exist. The conclusion is assumed in the premise. Any explanation, no matter how convoluted, is often deemed more acceptable than one which would force a complete re-evaluation of our past. The goal, it seems, is not to explain the artifact, but to explain the artifact away. This is not necessarily born of a malicious conspiracy to hide the truth. It is often a deeply human phenomenon. Imagine dedicating your entire life to building a specific historical model, only for a single corroded piece of bronze to prove your framework is fundamentally flawed. The institutional and psychological inertia is enormous. It is easier, safer, and professionally wiser to dismiss the inconvenient data than to dismantle one's entire worldview. The fear of the crackpot label is a powerful silencer, creating a chilling effect that discourages anyone from asking the truly difficult questions. And so, the story of our lost past is not just a story of sunken ships and buried cities. It is also a story of silenced questions and unopened doors. The evidence for a different human story may not be buried only under the sand, but locked away in museum basements, labeled Unexplained, gathering dust because it is too problematic to display. This wall of silence is the final and perhaps most tragic reason why our history remains incomplete. This wall of academic silence, however, is not insurmountable. It cannot hold back the tide of evidence forever. The artifacts are real. The questions they pose are valid. The ultimate responsibility, then, is not to defer to what experts are willing to believe, but to follow where the evidence itself leads. After everything we have seen, what does the evidence compel us to consider? What is the real story of humanity?
Our journey began with a simple clay pot, and from its impossible spark, we have traveled across millennia. We have held a mechanical cosmos in our hands, its bronze gears a silent testament to a forgotten wisdom. We have stood in the imagined glow of an inexplicable light in an Egyptian crypt, and listened to the legends whispering from an emperor's tomb that humanity dares not open. Each artifact, each anomaly is a single word in a lost language, a language that speaks of a past far more brilliant than we have ever allowed ourselves to imagine. Viewed in isolation, these are mere curiosities, easily dismissed, but seen together as a coherent body of evidence, they form a mosaic of a forgotten world. They are the surviving pages from a vast library of knowledge that was thought to have been burned to ash in the fires of time. The evidence strongly suggests that our history is not a straight, unbroken line of progress, but a cycle of staggering heights and devastating falls. It suggests we may be a species with amnesia, living amongst the faded blueprints and scattered ruins of our own forgotten genius. The mainstream narrative of our past is a simple and comfortable story, but these forbidden objects refuse to remain silent. They challenge us to be more curious, to question what we've been told, and to look upon the ancient world not with the arrogance of modernity, but with a profound sense of humility. The greatest mystery, then, is not what our ancestors were capable of achieving, but what we, in all our digital and technological sophistication, have lost along the way. Perhaps it is time we stopped looking at the past as a primitive prelude to our own time and started searching for the keys to finally unlock that library of lost knowledge.